Welcome to the Transformational Podcast. I'm starting really cold, really fast because Chris is eating M&Ms, and I just wanted to catch him trying to hide it.
I'm good. Hey, I'm good to go, man. I'm fine.
Yeah, good to go. Right. Yeah. Were they plain M&Ms or did you get the peanut ones? I mean, what do we have over
there? Dark chocolate M&Ms. Dark chocolate's the only way to
so
go.
Gross. What's wrong with you?
No,
Chris. Are you 50 now? Did you sign up for AARP? Like, how old are you?
I'm just telling you, dark chocolate is better. It just is. It's so much. And I'm not even just talking about how it's basically like vegetables because it's good for you.
It is. So it is technically good for you.
I'm eating my veggies. Yeah. All right. So there you go. Right.
Well, Chris, I spent the last 3 days resurfacing the deck in the back. And so for those who are watching, you can see a giant scratch on my nose. And I probably signed up for AARP at some point because I have no idea.
Are you old?
Yeah, I have no idea.
Don't even know.
Right?
How'd you get that cut on your face? Oh, I don't know. I was just working.
No idea.
Yeah.
And honestly, Chris, I don't even remember getting hit in the face. Now on the shin, I did take a freshly cut deck board straight to the shin as I fell into it, and it was when I was working with Joshua outside, and I rolled over on my back, and Chris, he's so helpful. I'm holding my shin. It hurts so bad. And I'm like, golly. And he goes, roly-poly.
Wow. He's got your level of compassion. That's fantastic.
Yeah. He was so helpful. But no, I finished it up.
Well, I got to know, did you laugh when he said that? Or were you like, really? What was your...
No, I actually thought that was hilarious. Because it took me a second to process what he meant. I was like, roly-poly, what's he talking about? But then I realized he was talking about me. And I was like, that's a good one, buddy. That's hilarious. And so, yeah, that's what I've been up to. What have you been up to the last few days?
So we're in, like many of you have said before, we're in summer mode. But one of the things I like to do is go visit the camps where the kids are going to camp. I like doing it because I truly believe in the next generation, and I want them to know their pastor and their pastor, like the pastor of the church, not just the guy who speaks on Sunday, but we've got all these other people. Like, I want them to know I care and I'm invested. And so I went down there this year, our 4th and 5th grade camp, and I've got a couple more coming up this summer, but our 4th and 5th grade camp actually went to the camp that we grew up going to.
So cool.
And it's changed. Yeah, it's changed a lot since then. I was laughing with the camp director because, Robert, do you remember the bunk beds that we stayed on when long time ago? They were made of like pipe, like pipe.
No, I remember.
Were screwed together not welded together, but cheap. They now do it for decoration these days for different things. They use that pipe, but this was no decoration. This was just going to make it work, and so.
And I don't think we had air conditioning, did we? I think if I remember right, the pipe beds, it was fans only, if I remember.
I think you're right. I think originally it was no AC.
Lots of snoring.
Oh, my Lance. Well, I don't think that's a staple of camp regardless.
Oh, okay.
I think that's going to be there no matter what time, year it is. But it was so great.
Funny.
They've upgraded so much. The dorms were nice.
What camp is it?
It's Piney Woods Baptist. Yeah, Piney Woods Baptist camp Piney Woods camp over in Lake. I forgot what it was called. Something.
I don't know.
Between Grove. Yeah, it's between Pine Lake, Texas. It's between Groveton and Corrigan. So East Texas, tall, beautiful pine trees. Loved it. But it was kind of cool because I took a walk down memory lane because I went there. I guess we went there for RA camp. We went there for preteen camp. We went there for middle school camp. Well, actually, we didn't have middle school and high school camp back then. It was just.
You remember that trail around the lake? The one that you could start on one end and you go it's a small lake, right? I mean, I don't remember that.
Yeah, it's not big.
At the time, it seemed like it was super long, but it's probably only half a mile.
Yeah, I mean, it's a quick lap around, but they've even changed that a bit. They've expanded it a bit, and it's cool. It's beautiful. The trail around it's still there, but they've changed so much. but actually at the end of high school, I actually worked there between my junior and senior year of high school, and
I did
it
not know that.
was yes while you
What
were
did
up
you
at the
do
Naval
there?
Academy.
Was you wash dishes? I
Uh,
mean, surely they didn't let you be in
I,
charge of anything.
you're right. I was the youngest. I was the youngest person on staff, so I had
Okay.
my lifeguarding certificate, or I was a licensed lifeguard or whatever. Um, and I got to
Sorry, Chris.
lifeguard.
I had no idea. Sorry, I'm like learning things. I had no
You
idea
didn't know I
you
was
were
a
a
lifeguard?
lifeguard.
Oh
No
yeah, dude.
idea. Oh
Yeah,
my
I
gosh.
probably out
Okay.
of the entire. This is funny. This is what happens when you move away and you become big
I
time. You
know.
don't think
I know.
about us little people in East Texas anymore.
I'm drinking my bougie water.
Yeah, you're Pellegrino over there. No, we. So I. This is hilarious. I forgot that you didn't know this.
Yeah, I didn't know
So
this.
it was so. But that summer I may have lifeguarded a total the entire summer, maybe
Okay.
a total of 10 times all summer, because the rest of the time, because we have a pretty big staff. Well, the older people, they'd
Were
get
you
those
just a bad lifeguard?
assignments.
Is that what it was?
Oh no, no, it was that they
You
needed
let one
somebody to be.
person drown.
Listen, no, no. They actually put me down at the lakeside, where basically
Okay.
it's just flipping people's canoes back over because everybody wears a
Oh
life
yeah.
jacket, and so you
Yeah.
literally are just out there to tell them to sit down in the canoe and go out and help them flip the canoe back over once they get it
Yeah.
turned over.
That's hilarious.
But so I'd actually spent a lot of time weed eating. I weed eated and mowed everything. I was there. Yes, dude. I weed eated for hours on end in East Texas heat in the middle of the day.
Yeah.
We were up early for breakfast because you either were on the serving line or you were in the pig pen, or which was where you had to wash the big cooking dishes, or the other one,
Okay.
I forgot what they called the other one, where you wash the trays. So literally you would wake up, you would work all day long, because it wasn't like you put on camp for people. You hosted camp.
Yeah.
So you were cleaning, you were working the entire day. But um, when I look back, I remember I got done with that summer, and I went back to my normal life my senior year, and it
Mm-hmm.
was actually a weird, difficult adjustment going back, because I didn't realize all that God had done in my life that summer, and how I'd spent so much time with Him and grown in my
Okay.
faith. I just didn't know it until I went
Yeah.
back, and it just seemed like everybody else was off. And I was like, why are
Yeah.
you? This is not right. Why are
Mm.
y'all acting? And I actually, I remember telling Mom one time, I was like, man, I walk down the halls and I feel like I can see, um, when I see people, I feel like I see their pain sometimes, and I don't understand
Mm-hmm.
why. And Mom didn't really know what to tell me. I was like, I don't know,
Yeah.
it's weird. And but there were
Yeah.
several things, even just with friends, that I was like, man, I don't think we should do that or say that or whatever. And it was just strange, because God had molded me over that summer. But I look back at my life, there were so many moments, not just that summer, but at camp moments, where God would show up in such a real, tangible way that
Yeah.
it began to change you. In student ministry, I used to call those things pinnacle moments. Those moments
Yeah.
where you go and your experience with God is just so real, so vivid. You come back, your spiritual tank is full. We used to do this. I guess Super Summer was a big deal for us too. There was a camp called
Yeah.
Super
I remember
Summer, and
that.
it was
Yeah.
it was like that too. Um,
It was at East Texas
but
Baptist University, if I recall. And
yeah,
Baylor, I think, did it one year as well.
I think it's Mary Hardin Baylor, but yeah.
Yeah, Maryhern Valley. No, you're
Um,
right.
yeah, yeah. So,
Why do you think that is,
but
Chris? Why do you think you have the pinnacle moment? What do you think? Or unless I'm jumping ahead, I don't want to jump too far
no, you're
ahead. But what do
good.
you
You're
think it
good.
is that's giving you that pinnacle moment? What do you think about that
Well,
experience?
as I look at it, I think it's those moments where um, you separate yourself from the everyday grind of life.
Mm.
It is something
Yep.
different.
Yep.
You're back then we didn't have cell phones.
Yeah, no, you
You
can't
had
say
a
put your cell phone down and nobody
right,
had
right.
it.
I mean, but you didn't have a landline that you were able to just pick up and call your buddy and say, hey, let's go hang
Hmm.
out or whatever. But it just changes the rhythm of the day. You didn't have video games, you didn't have television for the summer. I mean, it was it was a giant reset for me that one summer I was working there. And
Yeah.
I think it's because you strip everything else away, and really you're just in nature. You're working hard, but uh, you
And you're
become
serving
where
God,
you
right?
yeah, you're serving God, and you're eliminating distractions in a way that you wouldn't normally do. Now, as I was thinking about it, there is a passage of scripture that I think about that when I think about Pinnacle Moments, this is what comes to mind, and it's where
Okay.
Jesus takes a group of his followers, not all of them, but he took Peter and James and John up on a mountain with them, and to be alone. All right. And Robert, stop laughing at my glasses, bro.
No,
Um,
I'm actually laughing. I'm laughing at the fact that he took 3 or 4 of them to be alone, but really what they're about to. And yes, you are old, but I can't laugh at you today
okay.
because I've got this weird cut on my nose.
Okay.
So I've got
Oh, I
I've got
thought,
I woke up, Chris. I woke up so old today. I barely got out of bed. All right, and like
oh my
decking,
gosh. Well,
doing the
okay.
decking
Well, then
work.
I'll
Whoa!
take my glasses for now. So, but
But I
anyway,
was
he takes
actually
these.
giggling that you described taking 3 people up to the mountain to hang out for what's
Yeah.
about to happen. I don't know
Yeah.
that that was necessarily it.
Well, it just says that he led him up there to be alone in
Yeah,
Matthew.
yeah.
Now, this is in 3 different accounts, which I think is significant because Matthew, he wasn't invited on the trip, but he's one of Jesus' disciples, right?
Dude,
Um,
that's really,
big,
I've never thought about that. That's crazy,
yeah,
right? Yeah,
yeah,
Matthew
right.
wrote about it. Yeah, huh.
Matthew writes about it.
Okay.
Mark writes about it. He's getting his
Yeah.
account. Most people believe he's writing down the first-hand account of is it Paul? Where's he getting his information? It's not Paul. Hold on. Let me flip
Wouldn't be
back to it.
Paul.
It would not be
I don't want
Paul.
to be,
Just a second.
I'm not going to guess.
But
I'm going to let you
Luke,
look it up and
yeah.
make fun of you. I know why Luke wrote it. Luke wrote it for the great Theophilus or something like that. Basically, he wrote it for
Yes.
a Gentile ruler. Mark's firsthand account was an
Oh yeah,
account of
this
someone else.
I was not yeah, he was not one of the disciples, but he accompanied Paul on so he lived when Jesus lived, and he accompanied Paul on his journey. So he was very close. He
Okay.
was he had to be one of the not one of the 12, but one of the mass followers. Because a
Yeah,
lot
and
of
he
times
was
when
the
we think
first
about the people
to write down, is what we think, right?
right. And so then Luke. So you have these different eyewitness accounts, but even Matthew writes it. And he wasn't invited on the journey. But
Yeah.
they all write about it. All 3 of these write about it. And I'm gonna read it from Mark because I just like the way Mark says it.
Okay.
Um, it's Mark
Mark
9,
9.
starting.
Yep.
Yep, starting with
Verse 2.
verse 6. I'm
So
sorry,
you're going to start
2.
with
I
verse
don't even.
6?
No, I'm gonna start with verse 2. But if you see what the word starts with in verse 2, it's the word 6. And so instead of saying 2, I said 6 because it was right there. Here we go. Verse 2.
Okay.
Verse 2 says, 6 days later, Jesus took Peter, James, and John and led them up on a high mountain to be alone. As the men watched, Jesus' appearance was transformed, and his clothes became dazzling white, far whiter than any earthly bleach could ever make them. Then Elijah and Moses appeared and began talking with Jesus. Peter exclaimed, Rabbi, it's wonderful for us to be here. Let's make 3 shelters as memorials, one for you, one for Moses, one for Elijah. Now, I love this. He said this because he didn't really know what else to say, for they were all terrified. I just like it. Peter's that kid who always has to say something, and you're like, Peter, just be quiet. But he says it.
Yeah.
But I love it. He's saying, let's make 3 shelters because in essence, what I feel is, and it's what I would feel at camp so often, man, I wish it would always be like this. I want to stay here. Like, this is amazing. This is real. It says they were terrified. I would love to go look in that verse and see what the origins were. But that moment was probably a little bit terrifying, but also awe-inspiring and just, holy moly, but we have those moments. Kids have that moment at camp where they're like, why can't every day be like this? Like, walking with Jesus be like being at camp every day.
Yeah, were they the terrified piece? Let me look at it real quick because I think in Matthew it says it was actually after the voice from God spoke,
Yeah.
which is what. And I think a lot of times
Yeah, when they hear
When
God's
you look
voice.
at God's, interaction with humans, you'd find that a lot of times it's terrifying, which is why Jesus is so awesome, because he was relational and not
Yep.
terrifying. Anyway,
So it
so
goes on
just
and
to
says,
scratch that itch.
then a cloud overshadowed them, and a voice from the cloud said, "This is my dearly loved son. Listen to him." Suddenly, when they looked around, Moses and Elijah were gone, and they saw only Jesus with them. As they went back down the mountain, he told them not to tell anyone what they had seen until the Son of Man had risen from the dead. It says, so they kept it to themselves, but they often asked each other what he meant by rising from the dead. I think that's significant too, because he's going, don't tell anyone till I rise from the dead. And yet Jesus has told them already, hey, this was going to happen to me. And they still don't get it. They're like, what does he mean by rising from the dead? Like, they
Yeah.
didn't see Jesus as even at this moment, as going to go to the cross and die. But all that to say, they have this moment where God moved in a mighty way, a powerful way. And they go, we want to stay here. Like, let's build shelters. Let's hang out. Let's keep them here as long as we can. And Jesus goes, all right, no, we're going to go back down the mountain. Don't tell anyone.
Yeah.
But why did Jesus, I had the thought of, why did Jesus want them to see that? Why did he take them up there with them? Don't you think it was a moment of saying, hey, I want you to come and experience something that is going to fuel your faith, so that when I do die and rise from the grave, you're going to be like, holy moly, he told us this. And let me tell you the story of where we saw this happen, right? That it was meant as a moment to just to fill their tank spiritually.
Yeah. And in fact, it was the three people he took up. Yeah, the three people he took up are actually the three people he gave nicknames to.
Yeah.
Did you ever realize that? Right? Peter, rock on which I'm going to build this church, and then the Sons of Thunder.
Right. Yeah, Sons of Thunder.
Awesome call sign. Yes. I don't know that it was, and actually, Chris, from a call sign sorry, we're going to take a rabbit real quick, but from a call sign perspective, Jesus gave them the Sons of Thunder because they were quick to be feisty. And I think that's hilarious because it's quasi derogatory, but it's also a loving, like tongue in cheek, much like a good call sign. And so anyway, the three people he took up, you're right.
How do people get call signs real quick? Little side note here, guys. How do they determine a call sign?
You get a call sign if you do. Yeah. No, I mean, you get a call sign if you do something dumb. You can get a call sign if you look like something. And, if you have a likeness. Yeah. So I have a likeness of a South Park character named Timmy.
Who brought that one up? And, who gave you yours?
Joe Sweat. And he was we were in a hotel, and all of a sudden I hear Timmy, and I'd never seen the show before in my life. And he's like, your call sign's Timmy. And so I had to turn it on. Comedy Central or whatever played at the time. Horrible show. Don't watch the show. But I turned it on just to see who they were talking about. And as soon as it came up, I was like, okay, yeah, that's fair. And it's been a term of endearment. It's been a term of endearment since. And so I'll respond to that as quick as I respond to Robert, and sometimes quicker, strangely enough. But anyway, sorry, we got way off, Chris. Back to the Pinnacle Moment.
The bottom line,
back to the Pinnacle Moment.
These guys with the call sign, they're with Jesus, and they come back down. Now, they still have a lot of ministry left, and that's coming up. But I think of these moments as these pinnacle moments where you experience God in a very real and very tangible way, in a way that God surprises you, in a way that God moves in your life. And I think that many of us have these moments. And there's people who grew up going to camp. And what I hate is they a lot of times people would beat up they just had a camp high. I think they had a pinnacle moment.
High, you're right.
Right.
And I don't like the camp high phraseology, because I think it's not a good description.
Right?
And it's not a good description of what's happened.
Yeah.
Right? Like Peter, James, and John, you go to camp and you have an actual encounter with the living God. And Peter, James, and John had an actual encounter with the living God. So it's not a camp high. It's a pinnacle moment. It's a moment where you've had. That's why I asked you. I was like, what is it? You said it was a giant reset, right? What's that pinnacle
Yeah.
moment? It's a giant reset. We're
Yeah.
getting away from everyday life, breaking up the rhythm.
Yeah, and experiencing God in a way you don't normally get to experience God, and so
Yeah.
why is that so important? Because I think that even if a kid comes back from or you come away from a moment that was a pinnacle moment, you you still have a moment that you can look back in your life and go, man, I remember that was a moment that God showed up. I experienced God at that place. I experienced God in that moment, and I think
Yeah.
for kids it's often camp, but I think for adults it could be a Christian concert. It could be a worship night at a church. It could be a certain service that you went to at a church for the first time, or
Could be a
whatever.
short-term
But
missions trip because Chris,
it
I
could be,
remember
yeah,
like for
yeah,
me, we did a few short-term missions trips to Mexico growing up, and those were pretty formative in my life. I think Chris, one of the most you talk about, it's not the kind of the difference between summer camp and kids, and then I had the missions trips as I got kind of going along. I was let me see, what is this, 24? So like 14 years ago, 2010, I did a missions trip with a church from North Carolina, and we went to Tanzania.
hmm
And man, that was a pinnacle moment, Chris. I mean, that was a huge pinnacle moment. I came back from that trip, Chris, and
hmm
I actually switched the direction of my career post that trip. Prior to that
really,
trip, I was on a path to go be a squadron CO, go do the normal, what would be considered the normal military career as a pilot. And coming back from that, God had already planted a few seeds about test pilot school, which I didn't think I was smart enough for. And in fact, it's debatable whether I was smart enough for it. Um, and and so he had planted a few seeds, and it was him planting, Chris, because I didn't even know that thing existed, and I didn't know I'd be like I didn't know anything about it. And it was at that missions trip where I had a pinnacle moment, and I was talking to somebody, I was talking to a missionary, and she was telling me, she says, God has us in 4 or 5 different major spheres of influence, and she's like, you are in a sphere of influence where God really needs the light. And
yeah,
and so that one kept me in the military because I was thinking about getting out. And two, when I came back, it solidified the fact that God was pushing me to go towards the test pilot school thing. And so I switched,
yeah,
but it was that moment of being away from everything. I mean, I'm in
yeah,
Tanzania, and while we had cell phone service, I had what most would call a burner phone. It was literally just a kind of keep up with where folks were. I traveled overseas enough to know how to navigate that well enough, but huge. So I guess my point being, tell that story not just because it's a good story, but because I think
it was a
sometimes
pinnacle moment.
yeah, and we equate pinnacle moments to church camps and some other stuff, and that, maybe we can't see that again. That was for the back of the day, but I think in reality, I think God calls us a lot of times to do something that will get us out of the normal rhythm and into a pinnacle moment, an opportunity to hear from
Yeah.
Him.
Well, you say God will do that. I think we've got to be intentional. I think it's important for us to be
Mm,
intentional
mm,
to say, hey, I need, and I don't mean this as it doesn't need to become a crutch, but it should be a moment where we go, man, I need to make a trip to the mountain. I
yeah.
need to be intentional about putting myself in a place where I can maybe get away from the normal rhythm, to shut off the noise, or so for some, I encourage. There's some marriage conferences out there that maybe that's what you and your spouse need to do together, and who knows what God will do there. It might be some of these worship groups, they actually do tours. I've heard of people having an incredible experience with God at one of those tours where they go on tour, at Elevation, or oh gosh, I'm going to draw a blank on Maverick City Music. There's several others that they'll go on
Yeah.
tours, and they'll go and they'll just do. It's basically a worship night, but like at our church, it doesn't even have to be that big. At our church,
Yeah.
once a quarter or so, we do an abide. The last 2 abides that we had here at this church, Robert, I'm just telling you, the Spirit of God was moving so strongly. I was filled up. I was tired going into it, but I was so
Yeah.
energized coming out of it,
What
just
is
because
abide for
of
you guys?
Abide for us is a night of prayer and praise. It's built based off of John 15 that says, "Abide in me, and I'll abide in you. Apart from me, you can do nothing." Um, and so
What verse was that again? You said John
that's
15 what?
John 15. Yeah, I think that might actually be John 15:1, but I'll pull it up real quick and make sure. Um,
Yeah. I just want to write it down right. You know that is.
Yeah, I get you. I get you. But it's that night where we just spend time praying, and it's not 15:1. Hold on.
But it's close.
It's John 15:5. I'm the vine, you're the
Yep.
branches. Those who remain in me and I in them will produce much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing. And so,
Yeah.
so that being said, I think that being willing to say, man, I need to be in a place where I experience that. And for some, it might be a women's conference. I know that many people will go to a women's conference with a group from their life group or a group from church, and hear some great teaching, be challenged.
Do you remember how Dad used to model that for us? Do you recall that? Like he used to do 3 days.
Yeah, are you talking about Promise Keepers, or are you talking about something else?
No, it was actually, there was a few times when he had just some pretty big decisions to make.
Oh yeah,
And he would go away to a friend's cabin or friend's, like, if I remember right, it's like a farmhouse kind of thing. And it was local, it was close. And he would go away and he'd be intentional about getting away from the hustle bustle and spending, 3 days of intentional, kind of going through that. Now he would only quasi structure it just to make sure he didn't waste his time. In other words,
right.
As I can do, right? If you give me 3 days away, next thing you know, I'm building forts. Maybe not doing what I should be doing, right?
Right.
But he was intentional about getting away and kind of hearing from the Lord, asking a specific question, and then expecting an answer, and at least giving some space, even though 3 days doesn't seem like a lot, but sometimes it's all you have. But giving some space to have an answer and be quiet and listen. Does that ring a bell? I mean, I don't know. I remember that.
Yeah.
I remember looking back in that. And that was something that was formational, at least in my life, thinking back.
Yeah, I remember him doing that and spending time away. I was also going to. I referred to Promise Keepers. You remember Promise Keepers?
Yeah, it was a great one.
And Promise Keepers was a time for men to basically have a pinnacle moment, and there's still men's events like that. There's now organizations where you can go, out into Colorado or Montana or whatever, and do like a several day guys trip with organizations that are faith based organizations, but literally their desire is to get you away from the hustle and bustle so you can spend time listening to God, experiencing God.
So, Chris, I don't know if you were thinking about going to the next verse or not, or if it struck you, but I'd like to just touch on the next one, if that's okay, because I think it's very fascinating. If you read this scripture, they come from this pinnacle moment where they have a maybe not a face-to-face encounter, but they do have a face-to-face encounter with Moses. Talking about Jesus' Exodus, if you look that up, which is really interesting because Jesus is talking to Moses about Exodus, his departure. And Exodus is not a departure from, it's a departure to, right? And so Moses led the people of Israel to the promised land, and Jesus was about to exit to his place in glory. But aside from that, they come down from the mountain, and what's the first thing that hits them right in the face? Life.
What you got? Oh, yeah.
Life hits them right in the face, right?
Yeah.
They come down from the mountain. Their very first thing that happens when they come down from the mountain is they come down and they said, it says, when they came to the crowd, basically they came down the mountain and there was a crowd. And so they come down and a man approached Jesus and knelt before him. Lord, have mercy on my son. He has seizures and is suffering greatly. He often falls into the fire or into water. I brought him to your disciples, but they could not heal him. And Jesus, responds, "Oh, unbelieving and perverse generation, how long shall I stay with you? How long shall I put up with you? Bring the boy here to me." Jesus rebukes the demon, and it came out of the boy, and he was healed from the moment. The disciples came to Jesus in private and asked, "Why couldn't we drive it out?" Jesus replied, "Because you have so little faith. I tell you the truth, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move. Nothing is impossible for you." When they came together in Galilee. Anyway, it kind of goes on. And one of them, one version, I think it was the Mark version, if you don't mind me kind of getting there, Matthew Mark. If I recall, he says something along the lines of, blah 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 blah. No, I said it. Possible. This kind can only come out by prayer, and so he's basically teaching them a lesson. But I think what's interesting is they come straight off the mountaintop and straight into adversity. Now, it's just the three of them. The other disciples clearly have been working this problem since they've been gone. But I think oftentimes we leave the pinnacle, and much like you walk into real life, and it feels a little bit like a buzzsaw. I mean, this is probably not just a buzzsaw. He gets down, hey, we can't heal this. And he's like, you have so little faith. How long am I going to be with you? I mean, I'm sure disciples, especially the three that were with them, are kind of like, and back to reality. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I think
honestly, that's one of the things that we talk about often is that almost every time you have a mountaintop experience, expect the minute you get back down, there's going to be something that challenges your most recent experience. To try to suck, you just got filled up, and it's going to try to suck everything that you just got filled up with, and you have to come down with, somewhat expecting that. Dad used to say that, hey, after a big high, just know the enemy's going to come, attacking. So be ready. But
come knocking, right? And actually, I'm glad you went there, because that's what I was trying to set up. I was trying to set up the idea that we have these pinnacle moments. We should look at them, look back at them, and honestly, we should try to allow opportunity and space for them. But I think we also need to be prepared coming off of a pinnacle moment. When we have a pinnacle moment, is we need to mentally prepare ourselves for coming back into, I guess you could say, back into normal life, the normal routine. When I came back from the Africa trip, one of the things that we were talking about as a group before we came back is the idea that, okay, we're going to get back to the normal routine of life. And, not only is Satan going to try to beat us down with something, he might even try to just distract us and maybe even look back at our experience as a one-off, and maybe as the camp high, make us see it as a camp high versus a moment where we actually had a real encounter with the Lord. And so I think it's fruitful. It's important to have that expectation, and then know, because you get to manage it.
Yeah. So it also makes me think of Psalm 46:10 that says, "Be still and know that I am God. I'll be honored by every nation. I'll be honored throughout the world." That be still and know that I'm God. There's another message says, step out of the traffic and take a long, loving look at the Most High God, or something like that. I don't have it memorized, but I love that. It's take a step out of the traffic. Be still. That's what the mountaintop's really about. It's about getting still with the intent of looking to God and just saying, I just want to experience you. I just want to experience you like never before. And
so how many of those kids, I was going to say, how many of those kids you think are going to come back with their pinnacle high this week? And how exciting is that?
Yeah, I think that they love camp, and I think the camp is a good experience. I think at their age, I don't know how many or what, because they're young.
Fair.
But they get a little bit more into it the older they get. But at the same time, they all have an opportunity, and I love that we create those opportunities to just go, hey, maybe you'll experience God in a way you never have before, in a way that you go, hey, listen, I get that I may face some stuff, but that makes me question what God's doing. But here's what I know. I know He's real, because there was that moment. There was that time that I can look to, I can point to and go, wow, no, He moves so powerfully. And I know He's, and I think it's good for us to have those moments. And so I think maybe a little bit of the takeaway for me from that, and just reminder, is that we're really intentional with, and honestly, I'm intentional about wanting my kids to experience those moments and have those moments. But I think we also, as adults, we have to be intentional about putting ourselves in those moments, or to experience those moments. And maybe for some, it's going to camp with your student ministry or whatever. Because who knows?
Camp counselor, right? People, they need people to go.
They need it. They need it. But not just for you, but you'll get blown away. Or maybe it's that you sign up for a short-term mission, or you find a marriage event, or you find, you just go, listen, I'm going to put myself in a place. Yeah.
Yeah, we had one that just came back last week, and the stories that came back out of that, just where God showed up, or God enabled, or God had pre-prepared. I mean, one of the guys was driving a truck that is a Ford, and he's a friend of mine, and he is like point design, knows how to do everything on a Ford that you could possibly imagine. And anyway, as they're driving back from the high, from the Pinnacle Moment, Satan meets them about halfway somewhere in Kentucky. And the main drive shaft bearings need to be replaced. And so in the middle of the night, out in a motel parking lot, he's out there underneath this truck with another guy, and they're trying to basically replace the bearings. And one of the things, I mean, tools came out of somebody's brand new Ford Mustang who had been visiting from Canada. I mean, God arranged this moment, okay?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
one of the things he shared with me, which is really important, he said, he's like, but I looked back, and as I'm getting a little bit frustrated because life is like basically hitting me right in the face, I'm coming to the realization that God had prepared me for many years to change this axle bearing in the middle of a parking lot to include having the right tools from some random strangers from Canada. I mean, Chris, he's like, it was by design. And he goes, and as soon as I realized that that was what God was doing, that God had pulled that together because he knew we needed that, he goes, I
Yeah.
realized that, okay, I can see God's hand at work here. And so I do
Yeah.
think it's important to be intentional. And, hearing stories like that, I think is really important, hearing these other transformational stories. And so I know we've kind of talked about it,
Yeah.
but I think I
And
want to do
that's
a couple
it.
of guests.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I
Well,
want to do a couple of
that's
guests
it.
every now and then.
Yeah, what you just said, that's it. It's those moments that are transformational. That's what we're doing this for. It's like
Yeah.
anybody can experience transformational faith. It's just, are you intentional about putting
Right.
yourself in that place to experience God? It won't happen by accident. And I think that that's
Yeah.
where we want accidental faith, and that's not
Right.
transformational. You
Yeah.
have to be intentional about stepping. You won't accidentally take a step. And so maybe for
Yeah.
some that's it. And so, yeah, I would love to get more people because I've heard some incredible stories of transformational moments in people's life, faith transforming moments. You've had some, and so yeah, we're gonna
I think we're going
actually
to
have
mix
a
it
few
in,
people
right? We're
on.
just going to kind of
Yeah,
sprinkle it. It won't be all the time. And frankly, I think it'll be, but unfortunately, you'll be stuck with us for a lot longer than maybe you hope. Maybe you'll enjoy the guests. But we're going to sprinkle it through. I already have a few ideas of some folks that I'd like to talk to on your side as well as on my side.
hmm
And because I'm the only one who can keep this on the rails, Chris, I'll probably do the interviewing. You be you just go too long.
we'll see. We'll see. I think that I
You
think
think
that
you can do it?
I've
You think
got
you
I've
can do
got
it?
some interviewing moments in me. We just
All
have
right,
to
well,
see.
friends, if you think Chris can keep it on the rails, you let us know. You tell us in person or whatever, and then maybe we'll let him do a few of the podcasts
I'll just
as the
have to set up
host.
I have to set up a countdown clock. All right, I'm used to that on Sunday
Okay,
mornings. All right.
no, that's fair. That's fair. But
Now my
maybe we'll sprinkle
team
that
and
across.
anybody who's listening will
Okay.
tell you that when it hits zero, it just means that it just tells me, hey, you need to stop. That I don't tend to finish by zero. That zero means you got to hurry up and pray now. So
Yeah, you've got
anyway,
another 3 minutes. I got it. All right. Well, so moving forward, you'll still have us every now and then. We might sprinkle someone else in. We hope that what we're trying to bring, obviously, is these transformational stories, these transformational faith stories. And so we still want to do this. We have plenty. We have not run out of material, but I think because it just life happens, right? And so there's plenty of
yeah,
material, but we want
hmm
you to have the same blessing that we have sometimes when we talk to folks who have a transformational faith that has actually taken them into like whatever their walk of life is. And so I think that's what I'm thinking, Chris. Kind of over to you for last thoughts, and then maybe we'll wrap this up. We're about there.
man. My main thoughts is this: look for opportunities to go to the mountain. You're gonna have all the reasons not to. You don't have time for it. That's not really my scene. That's not really. Jesus didn't actually ask those guys. It's
Right?
just as
Yeah,
he didn't say, "Hey, do y'all want to go?" He said, "Y'all are coming with me."
that's right.
And I think that now they had to respond, but I think he's inviting you to come to the mountain. And will you respond? And who knows? You may be blown away by what you experience, what God does in your life. It might very well be transformational.
Amen.